Welcome to the best YouTube channel for your listening module preparation. We upload authentic listening tests which keeps repeating in the exam again and again. Make sure to subscribe and take membership to support our channel. Listening, Section 1. Read the questions provided in the booklet carefully after reading the instructions. First, we will start with questions 1 to 10. Pay attention to the keywords and answer accordingly.
You will hear a man telephoning to ask for information about swimming lessons. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6 on page 2. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hello, City Swim School.
Oh, hello. I wanted to ask about swimming lessons. That's in a class, not individual.
Right. Well, we do group lessons at various levels. To start off with, we have what we call the Water Babies class.
The first class is called Water Babies, so babies has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello, City Swim School.
Oh, hello. I wanted to ask about swimming lessons. That's in a class, not individual.
Right. Well, we do group lessons at various levels. To start off with, we have what we call the Water Babies class. That's for babies of 3 months and over.
Really? As young as that?
Yes, that's really the best time to start.
Right. Well, we do have a baby, so I'll make a note of that. What do they actually do in the lessons?
Well, the main aim is just to familiarise them with the water so they feel at ease there. They get the children to enjoy themselves. They have lots of toys and things they can use to play with in the water.
Right. And how much do the lessons cost?
They're held on Tuesday mornings, and each lesson costs £3.80. It's not really a course as such.
OK. Well, I'll talk to my wife about that. But I was actually ringing about lessons for me.
OK, so are you a beginner?
Not exactly, but I'm not very good.
Well, the beginners' classes are really for people who don't have any experience of swimming. They aim to teach you techniques for breathing in the water, and they get you to do things like put your head underwater and open your eyes.
OK, I can do that.
And by the end of the course, they aim to have you swimming 5 metres.
I think I can probably just about do that.
OK, so you'd be better in the intermediate class then. That's where you learn the main swimming strokes, front stroke, backstroke and so on.
What about diving?
Yes, they'd teach you how to do that. And you'd also do some underwater swimming.
Not with a tank or anything?
Oh no, not scuba, just ordinary underwater swimming. And in the intermediate course you also look at water safety, both in the pool and when swimming in other places.
OK. Well, that sounds the right level for me, I think. So how much does that cost?
£61 for a course. That's 10 lessons.
Can you tell me a bit more about the class? How many people would there be in it?
Well, the intermediate class is usually around 8 to 10. That's what we aim at, though occasionally it might go up to 12.
OK, that sounds quite a reasonable size, not too many. And the class is for adults, is it?
Yes.
OK. And just out of interest, is there an advanced class?
Yes, they focus on developing more efficient swimming techniques and on working on your speed. And they also prepare you for competitive swimming.
Okay. No, I think I'd want to start with the intermediate one, really.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10 on page 3. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Now, is there anything special I need to know?
Well, the classes are on Tuesdays, and the first lesson is on January the 13th. So you need to register before then. January the 8th is the latest, but it's filling up quickly, so I'd do it straight away. You can pick up a form here or get one off the internet. And classes are at 7:30 p.m.
Right. Then I just roll up with my swimming trunks. Do I have to bring my own towel?
That's right. We provide all participants with a swimming hat, though.
Oh, I don't usually wear one.
Well, we do insist on it, actually. It helps the instructor to identify you, apart from anything else. Oh, and don't forget you need a 20p coin for the locker.
Oh, okay. Right, well, I've been meaning to do this for ages. I really need to get some more exercise, and everyone says swimming is good for your health.
Yes, and a lot of people find it improves their confidence too. And of course it could save your life, or even someone else's.
That's right. Okay, well, thanks very much. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Section 2. You will hear an audio guide introducing visitors to a museum. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15 on page 3. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Welcome to the Global Museum, located at the heart of this truly multicultural city, which is home to more than 60 different nationalities. The museum has a number of exciting displays and exhibitions, and this audio guide is designed to help you make the most of your visit. Altogether, the museum has 18 different galleries, and this season sees the opening of 3 new exhibitions. We recommend that you begin your tour by visiting this season's highlights. The Heritage Clothes exhibition is located in Gallery 5 of the museum. People who live in the area have spent 2 years preparing this exhibition, which brings together some of the fascinating garments traditionally worn in their own communities. They research the history of their community's clothing traditions and the customs and rituals associated with them. Altogether, 16 countries are represented, from Ghana to Korea, from Turkey to Nepal. The photographs that accompany each display case were taken by some of the City College students who are studying design and show the clothes being modelled by the real people who wear them in the course of their everyday lives. Another highlight this season is the exhibition called Toys from the Past, which can be found in Gallery 9. This exhibition, which will appeal to people of all ages, is on tour throughout the country and will be here for 10 weeks only. The exhibits include dolls made over 100 years ago with beautiful porcelain faces and, in some cases, real hair. The collection covers the favourite toys such as wooden train sets from many different generations and provides plenty of interest for children and adults. The gigantic board games, which are laid out on the gallery floor, are one of the most popular activities in the exhibition and should not be missed. This exhibition concludes with a special display of miniature toys. These small objects are on loan from countries all over the world and in some cases measure no more than a few centimetres. There's a tiny car made from matchsticks, a toy aeroplane complete with pilot and passengers made out of seashells, and some exquisite little buildings no higher than 4 centimetres.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20 on pages 3 and 4. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
The final gallery highlight of the season is the Biscuit Gallery at number 15. Many years ago, this city was famous for its biscuits, although today the factory no longer exists. Did you know, for example, that before biscuits were packed in paper or cardboard boxes, biscuit tins were fashion items? The factory made tins, round, square, triangular, hexagonal, for a whole range of different occasions, to celebrate national events, festivals, famous faces and so on. One fascinating display deals with people's favourite biscuits. There are sweet biscuits and savoury ones, biscuits filled with jam and biscuits filled with currants, biscuits with pink, yellow and white sugar icing, or coloured sugar flowers. When the factory finally closed, it announced that people's favourite biscuit was not, as you might expect, a chocolate biscuit or one filled with jam and cream, but a plain, savoury one which was eaten with cheese. When you get to the end of the exhibition, there's an entertaining hands-on activity to fill your own biscuit tin. All the biscuits ever produced by the company are piled up on a table along with various tins. The biscuits are made out of thin pieces of wood, but the weight, colours and shapes replicate the original biscuits. Your job is to fill a tin with biscuits so that when the lid is taken off, they sit there as neatly as they did when the job was done by machine. It's not as easy as it looks. If you would like to buy a memento of your visit, there is a museum gift shop selling postcards, souvenirs and handmade pottery next to the information desk on the ground floor. And finally, if you don't want to carry your coats and bags around with you during your visit, please make use of the free lockers provided by the museum. Enjoy your visit.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Part 3. You will hear a conversation between an art history student called Terence and his tutor about the student's plan for a class presentation. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
OK, Terence. Now, I've looked through your preliminary outline and notes for the presentation on the art of the Ife region in Africa. That's in Nigeria, right?
Yes. I'm concentrating on Ife sculptures from the 12th to the 15th century.
How did you get interested in that? I know there have been some recent articles in the journals about African sculpture.
Well, I've read most of those now, but initially I got my introduction to this at a special display at the City Museum a few years ago. I just happened to be there and saw these works and thought they were fantastic. And I even went to Nigeria last summer to see more of them.
I've seen the photos for your presentation, and I must say the sculptures are gorgeous portrayals of what appear to be kings and queens.
Yes, I decided to concentrate on those as they're the most typical. They're interesting because they're so naturalistic, unlike the abstract figures we often associate with African art. There's also a lovely sculpture of a mudfish and one of the scaly crocodile, but I didn't get very good pictures of those, so I won't spend long on them.
Right. So what was the city of Ife like when these works were made? It's on the Niger River, isn't it?
Yeah. The boat traffic's what made it a centre of commerce then, as it still is today. But nowadays it's better known as the home of a big university.
Speaking of modern-day Ife, tell me about your trip.
I was incredibly lucky to be able to get enough money to go. My parents encouraged me, but they couldn't afford to send me. I applied for a grant from the Arts Council, and in the end I got it. I also wrote a series of articles about my trip for the local newspaper, but I didn't get any money for that. I was just pleased to get them published.
And the highlight of the trip?
That had to be meeting a professor working on the site in Ife who had been a young boy when they first discovered the sculptures by accident at a building site in 1938. He had been working at the site. Of course, I also got to talk to lots of artists who are working there today, and I got to try my hand at making a little sculpture myself.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
Well, let's see what you might do to improve what you're planning for your presentation.
About the sculptures themselves, I think I need to add as much as possible about the details of the way they were made. Of course, I can't add anything about the artists who made them, because nobody really knows anything about them.
All good points. And you've certainly said enough about what the sculptures depict, what the subjects are. That's well covered. But I'd make some bigger photos of them so you can clearly see the fine detail.
OK.
And I would limit my personal reactions to these works of art if I were you. I know you think they're fantastic.
You're right. I'll contain my enthusiasm. What about the section of the presentation which I call history? I'd like to go into more depth about the history of that whole area, in the countries around Nigeria.
That would make the presentation stronger, but I think you've covered the situation regarding the rulers of the country quite well, and you've got plenty already about what the Ife people were doing then and the way their society was structured. And in fact, I think you could cut out the bit about modern Nigerian history because it's not relevant.
I agree, that doesn't fit. But perhaps I should concentrate more on the religious beliefs, since all these sculptures do seem to have some kind of religious association.
Good. I can lend you a book on that.
Oh.
Now, probably the part the class will find most interesting is the report of your trip to Nigeria and the research you did there. So I gather you managed to use the university library in Ife.
Yes. As soon as I'd explained why I wanted the information, that was no problem. They couldn't have been more helpful. There were some interesting accounts of how the first sculptures were found and what happened to them, which I want to include. What struck me when I saw the sculptures in Nigeria is the extent to which 20th century European artists were influenced by them. But that's beyond the scope of my presentation, I think.
Yes. What about the sources of the materials they used? You don't mention that anywhere.
I didn't manage to find out much about that. I want to cover the theories about who the original sculptors were, though.
Yes, the idea that a lot of them may have been made by the same person. That's very interesting.
It is, isn't it? Right, well, thanks for all the advice. Now I think I need to work...
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3.
Listening Section 4. Answer the questions carefully after reading the instructions. Now we will start with questions 31 to 40. Pay attention to the keywords and...
Part 4. You will hear part of a lecture about an early form of photography that developed in Britain and France called calotype photography. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Morning, everyone. Welcome back to this series of lectures on the development of photography. Last week, we looked at a type of photography called daguerreotype, the first commercially successful photographic process. Today, we're going to look at how this was gradually replaced by a technique called calotype. Daguerreotype was a major breakthrough, but there were problems with it. In particular, because the image was produced on a copper sheet, it was expensive to create each photograph. As a result, during the 1840s, a man named William Talbot began looking for an alternative approach. Talbot eventually became an influential figure, but he always said he was not a professional photographer. In fact, he trained as an artist. His greatest interest was painting, and he only became involved with photography as a secondary interest. Talbot spent many years trying to solve the problems associated with daguerreotype photography. He tried a number of different approaches, and it took some time to find a successful alternative. But in the end, what he did was, instead of producing each photograph on a sheet of copper, he produced them on paper, and at the time, this was a great advance. Talbot's technique, which he called calotype photography, had other advantages as well. Maybe the most important was that the pictures themselves weren't as sharp as the ones produced before. The sharpness had been a problem because it distorted everything. But this new calotype process produced images that were realistic compared to all earlier photographs. Calotype photography was invented in Britain, but it was also popular with French photographers. The 1850s were a time of rapid development in France, and photography was used to record these changes. One example of how important photography had become occurred in 1851, when the French government established a society to promote the interests of photographers, something that hadn't happened before. To begin with, there were 5 members, and maybe the most important was a man called Gustave Le Gray. Le Gray became increasingly fascinated by the calotype process. Most of all, he wanted to produce different types of image, so began a series of experiments to see how this might be done. His greatest success was when he designed the first camera that was able to create enlargements, an important step forward. Another of Le Gray's innovations was his work on the size of the equipment necessary to take photographs. Originally it was very heavy and difficult to move about, but Le Gray made it lighter and smaller. This meant he could take photographs outdoors more easily, rather than being limited to the studio, which had sometimes been the case until then. Le Gray produced numerous photographs during this period, and was highly regarded among fellow photographers. But his work also became famous among the general public, because he wrote a very popular series of books describing the calotype process and giving examples of his work. The simple fact was that people liked photography. They thought it was reliable, especially compared to drawing, where the human hand might alter or exaggerate things. This had various consequences, one of which was that photography was now often used to record the huge program of renovation work of historical buildings in France during the 1850s. The camera doesn't lie, so people said. As a result, the calotype process was admired not only by photographers, but increasingly by the government and by mainstream society. However, debate still remained about whether photography could truly be called an art form like sculpture or drawing. Certainly, although the public liked it, in the opinion of critics, photography could not be compared to other established forms of art. So, in summary, what can we say about calotype photography during this period? One thing to re-emphasise is that the 1850s were a period of great development in Britain and France. The culture in both countries admired all new technological advances, and photography represented these ideas because it was considered to be a science by most people. However, photographers didn't stop experimenting with new materials to improve the quality of their work. Most of all, they were searching for ways to make images more permanent because calotype photographs tended to fade over time. And in the end, they found that if the image was produced on glass, it lasted much longer. So calotype photography was slowly replaced by other techniques which had greater longevity.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4.